My daughter pulled the plug on the heater. You've got enough blankets. Before that, she hadn't let me turn on the lights or the TV. She had control of the refrigerator, and she had control of my bills. She called it caring. She called it helping. I called it controlling, and maybe it wasn't even safe for me. I was 73, recovering from a hip operation that had left me slow but not stupid. Electricity is expensive, she said, throwing my remote into her purse, and the noise keeps you awake. Noise is not a problem, I told her. The room hummed without sound, no fan, no TV, just the soft click of the cooling radiators. She went into the kitchen and tightened the rubber band on the refrigerator handles. The doctor says people snack at night because they're confused. We're helping you stay on track, she spoke in the soothing tones of a skittish dog. Sign this, Mom. I'll pay your bills. One less thing to worry about. She slid the printed sheet of paper across the table. Her fingernail brushed the line where my name should have been. I'm fine, I said. I can manage my own accounts. You forgot the password, she said, and the soup boiled over last week. I turned it off, I said. You came back later and said it boiled over, but I didn't see it. The pain in my hip throbbed, but I folded my arms and let the silence stretch. She assumed my slowness was capitulation. She didn't know about the voicemails with dates, the photos of the circuit breaker, the emails forwarded to my lawyer. She didn't know that the boy next door had checked my smoke alarms and fixed the loose latch on the back door, or that I kept a small record of her every favor. She didn't know that my strength wasn't in standing, but in waiting. Mom, she said softly, don't make it difficult. Make it difficult was exactly what I had planned. After her hip surgery, Lena arrived with a suitcase that looked indestructible and a smile that tried to be. Just until you're stronger, she said, setting the bag down by the door. She kissed my forehead like a nurse would a patient. Let me take care of you, Mom. Allow. That was the verb she chose, as if taking care was a favor I had to give permission for. At first, I was glad. She brought soup, rearranged the bottom shelves, put slipcovers on the chairs so I wouldn't snag the stitches. She labeled the Tupperware containers with the date and a polite command, eat me first. She moved my slippers closer to the bed. It felt like love. It almost was. But love doesn't count. Love doesn't count kindness, like a coin collector counts a coin. A week later, a chart appeared on the refrigerator. At the top, house plan. Below that, energy expenditure, food categories, doctor's appointment times. A second tab contained mistakes with dates. My lost keys, a pot of tea I left under the slipcover until it got cold, the 2 times I slept past my morning alarm. You need structure, she said, a turquoise pen flickering in her hand as she recorded my laps around the dining room table. This is what good grooming looks like. I've been taking care of myself for 73 years, I said. I didn't do it with a spreadsheet. She smiled, which is why we're doing it now. Small things went first. The television remote disappeared, reappeared with its batteries missing, then disappeared again. The landline moved into her bedroom. She installed a passcode on the Wi-Fi and said she'd read there were scams targeting older women, so best if she handled the internet. She set the thermostat lower for circulation and moved the kettle from its socket to prevent accidents. She took my checkbook to reconcile the afternoon confusion. I don't get confused in the afternoon, I said. You will, she answered, not unkindly. We'll get ahead of it. The cold arrived quiet and heavy, seeping under doors. One evening, she snapped a rubber band around the refrigerator handles, gentle as a parent closing a lunchbox. I stared at the rubber band, white against white, and felt something in my ribs tick. Not break. Tick, like a clock finishing a long pause. What is that for? I asked. Night snacking, she said. Sugar makes sleep worse. Doctor says keep a routine. The doctor has never been in my kitchen at midnight. Her smile thinned. Then she'd be appalled. She pulled my bills from the mail pile and set them beneath her laptop. Let me pay these, she said. You rest. Let me, I said back, and took them gently from her hands. She didn't fight me. She only watched where I put them, her eyes marking the drawer like a hunter marks a tree. That night, after she fell asleep, I opened the knitting basket. Under the soft tangle of yarn, I found the small phone Diego had set up for me. He is 17, lives 2 houses down, and mows my lawn for the price of cookies and a place to sit while his mother works a night shift. He speaks to me the way he speaks to everyone, without pity or patience, as if my age were a hat I could wear or take off as I pleased. I had asked him for a favor a week after Lena arrived. We sat on the back steps, he ate a pear over the sink, and let the juice run down his wrist. I told him I needed a second phone. Cheap, simple. I told him I needed to learn the voice memo app. He didn't ask why. He said, "Don't lose it," and programmed it to skip a passcode if I used my thumb. On that night of the rubber-banded refrigerator, I slid the tiny phone into the pocket of my cardigan and pressed record. The little red line began to crawl across the screen like an inchworm. It would be patient. So would I. The next morning, Lena brought coffee and a clipboard. "We should discuss power of attorney," she said as if we were sharing weather. "It's standard. You're still the decision maker, of course. I just help sign if you're tired." "I'm not tired," I said. "Then signing this will be easy." She placed papers between us. Her turquoise pen weighted like a jewelry display. I saw the line where my name would go. I saw the clause that would give her control of my accounts. I saw the way she didn't look at me. "What is this really about?" I asked. "The house? Your finances? Mark's job?" She flinched at her husband's name. "Don't make this about us. It's about safety." I kept my voice calm. "Whose?" She stood. "I'm not debating. I'm helping you avoid being the sad story on the local news." I picked up the pen, turned it once, and laid it down. "No." She didn't explode. She folded. The bright part of her dimmed, and what was left looked like a teenager who had tried to do the right thing and been told it wasn't right enough. "You're going to make me be the bad guy," she said. "I'm not making you be anything," I said. "I'm staying warm." The heater cord disappeared that afternoon. When I asked, she said the outlet had a crack and she'd call an electrician. She didn't. And at dusk, she tucked a thick quilt at the foot of my bed and said, "You'll have enough of a blanket." I waited until she was in the shower, then went to the breaker box and took photographs of every switch. The tiny phone clicked like a cricket with each shot. I recorded her checking my pillbox and sliding one dose into her pocket by mistake. I recorded the new passcode on the front door that she whispered to the handyman, but not to me. I recorded the day she used my credit card to order an air purifier, a second laptop charger, a silk blouse, and then told me the bank was overreacting when it called with a fraud alert. "Mom, I said I'd handle it," she told me, annoyed. "Banks treat older people like toddlers. It's humiliating." Humiliation is a feeling you learn to wear like a shawl, draped, not claimed. I said nothing. I watched. I let her think slowness was surrender. I went to my Tuesday morning appointments. Not physical therapy. Not anymore. Miss Keating's office is in a brick building that used to be a bakery, and it smells faintly of sugar, and paper. She has a salt streak in her hair that looks deliberate, and kind eyes that are not foolish. We had met years ago when Tom and I made our wills. After he died, I brought her muffins and asked what widows should know that no one tells them. She gave me a list. On that Tuesday, I brought my cardigan and my voice memos. We made a different list. We established a revocable trust in my name with a successor trustee I chose, not related to me, not dependent on me. We moved the deed to the house into that trust and recorded a life estate that meant I could not be removed without a court, not by a daughter with a turquoise pen or a husband with a debt. We put a freeze on my credit reports. We created bank alerts that chirped my secret phone if a transaction above $20 hit my accounts. We updated my medical directive to match what I actually wanted and got notarized copies without fanfare. Ms. Keating taught me how to revoke a power of attorney I hadn't signed yet, simply by telling anyone who asked that none existed and following up with a letter if they insisted. And Ruth, she said at the end of that first Tuesday, her voice lowering into something like apology. Record her. The way she speaks to you, the way she touches your things, the way the house and the money go missing. If she's doing this out of fear, we can work with her. If she's doing it out of greed, we will show it. Greed wears a caretaker's sweater, I said. She didn't disagree. She handed me a sheet with 3 phone numbers: Adult Protective Services, the Ombudsman for Elder Care, the non-emergency police line. You call them before you call me, she said, because there is a moment with this kind of situation when kindness must have a badge standing behind it. I tucked the paper into my pocket with the tiny phone and went home to my cold house. I don't want you to think my daughter is a monster. Monsters announce themselves. They arrive with teeth and a motto. And people like my daughter arrive with reusable grocery bags and a soft voice. She didn't intend to hurt me. She intended to solve something. Her life and my house was a lever. 2 weeks later, the first open house announcement featured my living room. The flyer came in the mail. A glossy photograph caught morning light slanting across my sofa, the Afghan I crocheted folded in a warm square. Charming bungalow, must see, it said. A date and time sat bold under the words. I looked at the photo for a long time. Then I walked into my living room and stood where the camera must have been. On the wall opposite me, a tiny hole had been patched with putty, the color of oatmeal. Lena denied it, then called it a misunderstanding, then confessed by blaming Mark. He just wanted to see interest, she said. There's no offer. But it's a seller's market, Mom. People will pay you what you deserve. You can move to a place with meals and an elevator. You won't have to worry. I'm not worried, I said. I'm angry. She folded laundry. She didn't look up. This house is old. The roof leaks. You fall sometimes. I fell once. You put an ottoman where a person needs to walk. We're trying to help, she said again, as if repeating it made it true. I turned away. The tiny phone in my pocket listened. A week later, I caught her at the desk with my signature beneath her hand. She had printed my name on a check to cash, a smudge of practice curves above the real ones. I was going to tell you, she said, which is what a thief says when the plan goes loud. For what? Groceries. For who? She didn't answer. That night, I ate the last of the frozen chicken and the apples that had gone mealy in the cold and felt my heart carve a small new room to store this. Diego came by that Saturday to shovel the first clean snow. He stomped his boots and grinned. You look like somebody put salt in your coffee, Mitsoy, he said, then glanced toward Lena's closed door. You good? I'm writing things down, I said. That's not the same thing. It's the first thing, he sobered. Need me to do anything? Change the locks on the back door, I said quietly. Put the old ones back by dinner. His eyebrows rose. You going to lock your daughter out? No, I said. I'm going to know that I could. When he finished, I handed him a paper bag. Inside, a loaf of bread, a jar of tomato sauce, 2 cans of beans, and an envelope with a 50. He didn't peek. He just said, gracias, as if thanking me for letting him help. 3 days later, Lena brought home a notary and a clipboard. It will just take a minute, she hummed. The notary smiled with professional boredom. She was young and smelled of winter mint. We're formalizing what we already do. What we do is live in my house, I said, and I still pay for it. The notary looked at Lena, not at me. She seems competent, she said, and I could see Lena think, yes, that's the problem. I signed nothing. The notary left with her stamp unopened. That night, the heat went off entirely. The landlord is coming tomorrow, Lena said. He'll fix it. I own this house, I said. Exactly. The landlord, she meant Mark. He had decided in his off hours between jobs to become a landlord in training, starting with my home. He had a key to nothing and a claim to everything, and he wore that claim like a leather jacket. He measured rooms he didn't pay for and tut-tutted about electrical panels he hadn't installed. We'll have to bring this up to code before a sale, he said, running a finger along my baseboard like dust was a moral failing. The next Tuesday, I invited a different man to look at my electrical. His name was Mr. Nolan. And he came in a city truck with a badge I didn't pay for. He was part of a winter program that inspected heating in homes of seniors. "Anonymous tip," he said at the door. I blinked at him. He blinked back. "We got a call you didn't have heat." "I have heaters," I said, "but someone has opinions about them." He followed me to the bedroom. He noted the unplugged cord. He noted the outlet without damage. He noted the refrigerator's rubber band. He noted the stove with the gas valve turned off and the valve lever bearing purple polish marks that matched my daughter's thumbnail. "We don't do family," he said gently as he wrote. And then, "but we do safety." He gave me a set of space heaters with automatic shutoff and a pamphlet listing the penalty for tampering with utilities in a vulnerable adult's home. "Hang on to that," he said, "in case anyone needs reading material." That night, when Lena told me again that electricity was expensive, I handed her the pamphlet. "Then don't use mine," I said. She read the first paragraph, scoffed, and tossed it back. "You called the city? Are you trying to get me arrested for helping you?" "Asking for heat is not a crime," I said. "But if you'd like to commit one, unplug something with a city sticker on it." The next blow came gentle. A letter with my name on it that had been opened and resealed with tape. I found it in the stack Lena had put under a magazine and a grocery flyer. The return address was the county courthouse. Inside, a notice of petition for guardianship. Petitioner, my daughter. She had checked boxes describing me as confused, forgetful, impulsive, prone to wandering. She had the date of a hearing circled in yellow. I sat at the kitchen table and read the letter twice. The room felt very still. I imagined the version of me she had described, a woman who left doors open, who burned soup to charcoal, who walked into snow without shoes. I did not dislike that woman. I pitied her. She needed gentleness. She did not need to have her life taken without a fight. Lena came in humming and paused at the sight of the letter. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," she said, and her face went white. I was going to explain. "What would you have explained?" I asked. "That I'm a danger to myself? That you're saving me from my own house?" She swallowed. "Mom, the court will see this is best. You'll stand up and tell a judge that I don't know my name?" "No," she said quickly, "just that you need help." "I asked for help with laundry," I said. "You brought a notary." She reached for the letter. I folded it and slipped it into my cardigan. The tiny phone in my pocket recorded the scrape of her chair and the shaky breath she took to keep from crying. She went to her room and closed the door hard enough to rattle the framed family photos in the hall. I looked at the people in the frames, the girl with a gap-toothed smile, the teenager in a prom dress she paid for herself with tips, the young woman carrying a baby on her hip, and then at the closed door that hid the woman who would put her mother on a stand. The next morning, I called Miss Keating, then Dr. Shaw. I made 2 more calls from the list she had given me. I explained things simply. The ages, the utilities, the bank account that had grown thin at the same pace my kindness had. I did not weep. My voice did not shake. If there is one luxury age affords you, it is the ability to tell the truth without fearing it will make you sound hysterical. "Bring everything," Miss Keating said. "And, Ruth, bring your doctor." Dr. Shaw is younger than my daughter and treats me with the respect some people reserve for museums. She agreed to perform a formal capacity evaluation, not because I needed it, I was telling her the story in sentences with verbs and dates, but because courts like paper. She asked me to recite a list of 5 words. I recited her 6. She asked me to draw a clock at 10 past 11. I drew it and then drew the same clock with the hands set to midnight because people often forget that midnight is still a time. She watched me laugh at that and did not laugh with me. She wrote notes. She stapled things. She handed me an envelope sealed with her signature across the flap. "Don't open this," she said. "Hand it to the judge." Will he like the penmanship? He'll like the words. On the day of the hearing, the cold seemed to have its own weather inside the courthouse. Ms. Keating met me at the entrance with a calm that felt like a cloak. Diego was there in a collared shirt, suddenly shy. Mr. Nolan from the city appeared with a clipboard and the bland patience of a man who had stood in many kitchens. The banker who had called about the fraud alert, her name was Janice, and she wore a brooch shaped like a leaf, arrived, eyes alert and kind. Dr. Shaw came straight from clinic, white coat over her sweater. I felt like a small army, the sort of army that wins because it remembers water bottles. Lena arrived last, hand wrapped in marks. He had combed his hair and overdid the cologne. She wore a gray dress that made her look like a teacher. She didn't meet my eyes. The judge was a woman with cropped hair and a weary voice. She had seen the stories I was afraid of becoming. She looked at the petition and then at me. "Mrs. Adler," she said, "do you know where you are?" "In the courthouse," I said. "On the third floor, courtroom B. The heat is the same as outdoors." A smile flickered in the corner of her mouth. She nodded to the bailiff, who opened the proceeding. Lena went first. She painted a picture of care so complete it sounded like a hospital. She listed my confusions. The day I didn't answer the phone because I was in the bath, the time the smoke alarm chirped because the battery died at 2 a.m, the 2 potholders I scorched making toast because I had turned the oven to broil and then rested my hand too close to the rack. "Mom has always been independent," she said, eyes glistening just enough. "But she's older now. We just want to keep her safe." "And to do that," the judge asked evenly, "you require control of her bank accounts and residence?" "It's easier," Lena said. "She doesn't have to worry." Miss Keating stood. "Your Honor," she said, "we have exhibits." We began with the simple things. Dr. Shaw handed the judge the sealed evaluation. The judge read in silence, pages turning like a metronome. She nodded. "Capacity intact," she said, not loudly, but every person in the room heard the hinge lock into place. We moved to the recordings. My cardigan phone filled the courtroom with the sounds of my kitchen. The soft clack of coffee mugs, my daughter's voice telling me to sign for my own good, the zipper sound of my refrigerator being banded shut, the words that hurt me more than the cold. "You'll have enough of a blanket." The judge's pencil paused. She looked at Lena. She looked at the pamphlet Mr. Nolan provided about tampering with utilities for a vulnerable adult. She looked back at Lena, and for the first time, my daughter stared down. Janice spoke next about the cluster of purchases on my card and the subsequent attempt to add a co-owner to my account without my presence. "We flagged it," she said simply. "It didn't meet our standards. We contacted the customer." "Which customer?" Ms. Keating asked. "Mrs. Adler," Janice said. "The account holder?" Diego, awkward and earnest, told the judge about afternoons he found me walking the dining room for exercise, about sealing smoke alarms and testing outlets. He described the day he saw Lena put a pot on the stove and then come back to turn the knob back to off before I entered the kitchen. He didn't accuse, he described. Facts are a kind of love when delivered clean. Then it was my turn. Ms. Keating had told me not to speak unless asked. The judge asked. "Mrs. Adler," she said, "what do you want?" The room was very quiet. My daughter's breath was a string. If you touched it, it would snap. "I want heat in winter," I said. "I want to decide when I am hungry and when I want light. I want my daughter to be my daughter, not my warden. I want to keep my house until I don't. When I can't, I want to choose where I go. I want the right to be old without being erased." The judge nodded slowly. "And your plan to ensure those wants?" "I've made one," I said, "with counsel." Miss Keating stepped up. She explained the trust and the life estate, the credit freeze and the alerts, the revoked nothing. The judge listened hard. The law, when it is kind, is simply memory arranged on paper. When it was Lena's turn to respond, she reached for tears and then for anger and finally for truth. "Fine," she said. "Yes, we wanted to sell. Mark lost his job and the bills were—" She stopped herself, glancing at him, at the room. "We made mistakes, but we were trying to protect her. People fall for scams. Your mother didn't fall for a scam," the judge said. "She fell for you." In the back of the courtroom, someone exhaled. It might have been me. The judge denied the petition. She issued a protective order preventing Lena and Mark from altering utilities or accessing my accounts. She referred the bank matter to the district attorney, not as a threat, but as a routine. Then she did something I didn't expect. She looked straight at my daughter and spoke in a voice that sounded like 3 in the morning. Care, she said, is not control. If you want to help your mother, ask her what that looks like. If you want her house, get a job. We walked into the pale winter sun, not victorious but upright. The cold did not bite as hard. Miss Keating hugged me briefly and told me she would follow up. Dr. Shaw squeezed my hand and said nothing, which is sometimes what doctors do when the body in question is a family. Diego asked if I wanted tacos to celebrate. I told him to bring 2 and to tell his mother I had made too much. At home, Lena was already packing. I can't stay, she said, eyes rimmed with red. After what you did? What I did, I said, was tell the truth. She glanced at the heaters Mr. Nolan had left in the pamphlet on the counter. You called the city on your own daughter. I called the city for myself. I took a breath. Lena, I know things are hard. I know you wanted help. You chose the wrong way to ask. You chose the fastest way to hurt me. I was drowning, she said, to the boxes, to the floor. You were a boat. I'm not a boat, I said. I'm a person. If you had asked to climb aboard, I might have said yes. You tried to cut me loose and sail away in my hull. Her mouth quirked at that, unwillingly. She sat. She rubbed her hands over her face as if it might rearrange it into someone younger. We put the house online, she confessed. Mark thought we could get an offer quick, do a fast close, convince you it was the best. You listed a house that isn't for sale, I said. She nodded, then laughed once, a harsh little sound I hadn't heard since she was 13. They call it a coming soon. Like a movie, life is not a preview, I said. You don't get to sell it before you've lived it. She left that night with 2 suitcases and a box of pantry food she didn't ask to take. I let her. Mark came later, avoiding my eyes, and carried out a television he had bought and a blender he hadn't. I didn't stop him. Things are not the point. Silence filled the house in new ways. The heater hummed, the refrigerator made its old noises. I walked from room to room, touching door frames like checking on sleeping children. I slept with the quilt and the heater both, not because I was cold, but because I could choose. The next day, I called the bank and closed the cards that felt tainted. I made tea and carried a cup to the back stoop. Snow lay on the garden beds like promise. Diego's boot prints looped across the sidewalk, evidence of someone who arrived when I needed him and left without taking anything I didn't offer. Lena called after a week. Her voice sounded raw around the edges, the way a rope does after too much weight. I'm sorry, she said. For what? I asked. Make them name it. That was on Miss Keating's list. For the heater, she said. For the listing. For the court, she inhaled. For making you feel like a problem to solve. I let the silence last long enough for both of us to hear it. I don't know how to fix this, she said finally. I thought if I controlled it all, the fear would stop. What fear? That I'd lose you, she said. That you'd fall and I wouldn't be there. That you'd leave the gas on and I'd find you asleep forever. That I'd be the daughter who did nothing. You can't fix fear by turning off the lights, I said quietly. You ask for it to sit and you look at it. Can I come by? Yes, I said, with terms. We made them like a treaty. She would not touch the thermostat. She would not handle my mail. She would not speak about money without using my real numbers, not her guesses. She would call before she came and leave when I asked. Even if we were in the middle of sadness, she would not borrow what she could not repay in a week. She would cook in my kitchen and clean it after. She would be my daughter first. In return, I agreed to text her my doctor appointments. I agreed to consider a personal alarm button in a weekly dinner at her apartment that I could cancel without a reason. I agreed to tell her when I was frightened, not when she had made me angry, but when the night felt big, the way it sometimes does. The bank? She asked. Small might? Are they? They may call, I said. You will answer. I did not promise to make it painless. Forgiveness is not anesthesia, it's a stitch. It holds even if it tugs. Spring arrived, the snow receded into damp earth that smelled clean. I planted lettuces and herbs and insisted on doing the turning with a small spade, not because I had to prove anything, but because I wanted the dirt under my nails. Diego built me a raised bed and brought his girlfriend to meet me. She is serious and funny in alternating flashes, and she share laughed when the basil fell over in a theatrical faint. We ate slices of tomato with salt and said simple things that meant more than they sounded. One morning, a woman from Adult Protective Services stopped by. "Routine follow-up," she said. She sat at my table and answered questions I didn't know I had. "People think guardianship is medicine," she said. "It's surgery." We ask if it's necessary. Often it isn't. Often it's grief with paperwork. Grief for what? For the fact that time goes only one way. I nodded. We tried to reverse it. It didn't take. She smiled. Mostly it doesn't. In June, I met with Ms. Keating to finalize the plan that had begun as a shield and became something like a map. We created a small fund set aside for emergencies that only the trustee and I could access. We updated beneficiaries. We wrote a letter for my future self about what I wanted if I became the woman in the petition. I did it without fear, and it felt like packing a bag for a trip that I hoped would be delayed. "Your plan is sound," Ms. Keating said as we finished, "but plans don't love you back. People do." I thought of Lena, face turned away on a courtroom bench. I thought of Diego's quiet, useful hands. I thought of Dr. Shah's envelope. I thought of the judge who had reminded me that old is not a synonym for gone. Summer stretched wide. Height gathered in the rooms, but this time it was wanted and watched. I read on the porch in the evenings and felt my hip become a my hip again, not the site of a story. I cooked what I liked and burned what I didn't. I turned the music loud when I wanted, and when I didn't, I listened to the hum of my house, a low, forgiving sound like a person clearing their throat before saying something true. Lena kept to the treaty. She showed up for dinner with groceries and left with leftovers, not my passwords. She asked questions and waited for answers. She offered, she didn't insist. Sometimes she cried in my kitchen and I let her. Sometimes I did and she let me. We are learning to be uncomfortable together without making a rule about it. One evening in late August, she brought Ava. My granddaughter is 11 and wears her hair in a braid she can tie without looking. She sat on the floor with her crayons and drew my house, not as it is, but as she likes it, with birds swooping in dramatic loops and a garden heavy with tomatoes the size of fists. She added a small orange cat on the porch. "We don't have a cat," I said. "You might," she said confidently. "The future has surprise animals." Lena and I both laughed at that, the sort of laugh that lets the breath move deeper than usual. After dinner, when Ava went to wash her hands and get the cookies, Lena stayed at the table. She looked older than her 38 years, not in a tired way, but in a way that meant she had stopped running from the mirror. "I paid the bank," she said. "All of it. We sold the car. Mark got a job at a warehouse. He says you won't forgive him." I told him that isn't the point. It isn't. I agreed. She nodded, eyes shiny. "Will you come to Ava's recital?" "Yes," I said. "And I'll bring flowers." She took a breath. "Thank you," she said. And the thank you seemed to hold many things beneath it, like the earth holds seeds. We didn't name them. Not everything needs a label to live. The true revenge, the only one worth its weight in years, was not to humiliate my daughter or to see her punished. It was to sit in my house with the lights on and decide for myself when to turn them off. It was to build a life so unmistakably mine that no one could mistake me for a project. It was to teach my granddaughter that help is something you offer with open hands, not something you take by closing someone else's. But there was one last act, as practical as a list. I drafted a letter not to the court or the bank or any agency with a seal, but to myself. I wrote, "If fear comes back with a clipboard, remember to ask who hired her. If your hands shake, record the shaking. If someone tells you that love requires darkness, turn on a light and watch their face. If a daughter arrives with a plan, ask for the page where you get to speak. If no such page exists, throw away the plan. Buy oranges, call the boy who mows the lawn. Call the woman with the salt streak in her hair. Call the doctor with the quiet hands. Call and then open the door when they arrive. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with the bills, right where my daughter would look if she ever forgot that I am not a house to be managed. On the envelope, I wrote in big letters, "For the day we forget." Autumn came early that year. The first cool nights tasted like apples. I made soup that didn't boil dry. I turned on the lamp I liked and read until the pages blurred. When the heater clicked on, it felt like a friend clearing his throat to say, "I'm here. I have always been here." You get to decide when. I sometimes think about that day in the courtroom, about the moment when the judge looked at me and asked, "What do you want?" It is the question no one asks women my age. We are expected to want safety, quiet, soft edges. I want those things sometimes, but mostly I want what I have now, a house with a voice that belongs to me, a daughter who asks instead of taking, a life that rings like a bell when you touch it. And if you need a neat ending, you won't get one. Life rarely bothers to tie bows. Lena and I still disagree about what counts as help. She still brings me flyers for senior centers with swimming pools, and I still hand them back and say later. Mark keeps his distance but sends holiday photos that include my grandson's gap-toothed grin. The bank sent me a card with a limit I chose. The city inspector waved when he passed on our block, and I waved back. Diego left for college with a toolbox I insisted he take and a promise to call if he needed to know how long to boil potatoes. He called. He boiled them too long. He laughed. On the first cold night of the new winter, I stood in the doorway to the living room and looked at the photograph on the wall. Tom, with his hand on a bicycle seat, steadying, letting go. The boy in the picture, our boy, was about the same age Diego is now. Knees knobby, mouth set in concentration. Tom's hand hovered an inch away, ready without controlling. That is what care is. That is what love looks like in a house that knows who it belongs to. I went to the bedroom and turned on the heater, the room filled with a gentle warmth that was both memory and present tense. I tucked the quilt at the foot of the bed, not because someone told me to, but because that is how I like it. I set the tiny phone on the nightstand and watched the red line pulse for a moment before I turned it off. I didn't need to record anything tonight. The house and I remembered. The power was on.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.